Welcome to Fayl Tales, Christian. I'm joined by a Christian shopper who was vice president at Morgan Stanley, who worked as a director in Merrill Lynch, and among other things, he's done a lot of amazing things in his career. Most recently, he is a consultant. He has his own consulting company, and he's also supported many companies through the IPO process. So it's nice having you.
Yeah, nice being here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Do you want to talk more a bit about your background and how you got here?
Yeah, I mean, the Central European University was, I'd say, in trouble, particularly when they had to leave Budapest. And when they came to Vienna, I said, look, can I help you? Mm-hmm. Let's, work on programs together. And then we Billy said, okay, let's work together on corporate finance. And then also I developed this course on sustainable finance,
yes.
Which I just ran now this January again. So that's how it came up in that regards. And teaching's been something I've been doing basically through most of my business career, always on the side. I remember when I was in Morgan Stanley, I actually took holidays to teach.
Oh gosh!
In Vienna, yes.
I couldn't do anything worse. Wow!
And I was probably the first one in corporate finance to run case studies. Because I did my MBA in Lausanne and was very influenced by case studies and thought it's a good idea. Now it is much more popular and many people are doing it here, I guess, right?
It's more practical.
Yeah. But it was pretty innovative like 3 decades ago. And that's basically it. And this Opolis to start with, this Opolis secure mail company came about with a client of mine at Morgan Stanley.
Okay.
In the course of a debt issuance.
Okay.
And this client, so to start with, this client was an alternative telecom company.
Based in Europe, I'm guessing?
Based in Austria, run by 2 entrepreneurs, very successful, the first ever alternative telecom company listed on the Vienna Stock Exchange. Became a client of Morgan Stanley. And in the course of this debt capital markets transaction, the client, Christian, his name, another Christian, he always said, this is so weird, all these emails are flying around constantly, clearly in this process when you exchange documents and you work on due diligence and all this. And he says, actually it's not very secure, is it? And this was then a topic that we start tackling when I actually left banking. We said, okay, let's think about what we can do here. Can we create a startup around this Opolis?
So at the time, how were documents being transferred? Was it just
email basically. Yeah, it was mostly basically emails and clearly physical. These data rooms are very much physical these days. Data rooms are mostly electronic, pretty secure. Who has access to. But back then it was basically shelves with a lot of documents. You took out folders, right, and physical. And, if documents were kind of distributed, they were scanned and then sent out by emails, you probably had like 15, 20 recipients, who a document or an email was addressed to. And then we sat down and said, look, how safe is such an email? And we said, actually, email is like a picture postcard, right?
Yeah.
I send an email, and the moment I send it off, I don't know what's going to happen to it. Has the recipient actually got it? And even if you got it, you may say, oh, I never got it. Mm-hmm. Then what happened to it? Was it stored? Was it printed? Was it forwarded to someone else?
Yeah.
Was it maybe manipulated in between? And we said, this is weird, actually. We have highly sensitive documents here, in the course of a capital markets transaction, but they're clearly comparable constellations as well. Whereas that email is not secure. Email is like a picture postcard.
What year was this, by the way, just for context?
That's actually, this debt capital markets transaction, we had in the late 90s already.
And, so email was not really encrypted or anything at this stage.
Exactly. And we started thinking about this. It must have been first time about 2003, 4 or something like that, around the time, so like 2 decades ago. And you're right, there was the time when sort of encryption became already more popular, but only within service systems.
Okay.
So whenever you kind of access these systems, there was a lot of risk what happens in between. So literally between your device and this kind of encrypted universe. Let me simply call it like this. So we said, look, even if you have encrypted service systems, this is still not secure. Sorry, it's not. And so we said, okay, so what can we do that if I send you a message, I control it, so I can see what happens with it. I can see whether you got it. I can see whether you opened it. I can see whether you printed it out. I can see whether you forwarded it to someone. Because it's my message, it's my information to you. I want to have control, right? Even what's important, if I send you accidentally a message, even happens these days, I can pull it back.
Yeah.
Safely pull it back
before I see it.
Yeah. So and clearly these were some of these features, but as I said, to each and every single email, I had literally a log there next to it, where I can see in this second you opened it, or in this second you received it, then you opened it, and then what you did with it. And it went much further then. So, these days it's pretty standard, but back then they didn't exist. So you maybe have this email for an hour, or you can look at it once. Or, for instance, even today, when you send an email, basically attachments are limited regarding to size. I'd say 10 MB, and it's over. It's probably being blocked. We had capacity up to, I think, 125 MB, right, back then, which, 20 years ago, right?
That's a lot.
15 years. That was amazing. Nobody literally had this. Also, it had other features as well. And that was the idea. And we created a pilot around this.
So when you say we, you did this with your...
It was basically 3 individuals.
Okay.
2 were these former clients of mine. They were these entrepreneurs creating the first alternative telecom company in Austria, and myself. So we basically had 2 individuals there who were very tech savvy, who had a track record in successfully building a company and IPOing it. And then I came by because I knew a little bit about finance and the finance world, and a little bit how to actually raise capital or how to speak to the financial investor world. And it was these trials. They would say, okay, let's try to lift this off.
Wow. And how many years of development or months did it take to get it up and going?
For the pilot, of course, I wasn't involved in this because I had no clue. For me, this was
so you came in a bit later.
Mystery. Yeah. It was all outsourced to my partners.
Okay.
But I'd say for the first pilot, let's speak about something like half a year or so.
Wow.
And it was literally done in-house. So we didn't employ any programmers or something like this. These people were very, very good at doing this.
Yeah.
And I have to say also this firm never had tons of employees. No, absolutely not. It was mostly the 3 of us with some minor tasks that were outsourced, but mostly we worked on this on our own. And therefore did everything ourselves. So, for example, I was then later involved in sketching the handbook for this device, and doing marketing material, for instance, or drafting PR documents and so on and so forth. Working on the website, for instance, and some features, and clearly constantly testing the device, but and giving feedback what worked, didn't work, or what we could do nicer, or test this all with friends, at the beginning,
and they liked it.
Say, oh yeah, no, absolutely, and this was basically, so we had kind of a soft launch, and it's quite funny what people pick it up, and suddenly you have people from, I don't know, India looking at this, and Colombia, and for various reasons. I mean, today the world is really global, and obviously through the web you reach people you don't even know who they are, but because you exist. And we created this kind of app.
It sounds like things were going really well. You were working.
It was going pretty well.
Yeah.
So it was working.
Mm-hmm.
It was working, and I was just thinking before I came to the session today, what I recently sort of preached or communicated, what venture capital investors usually look for in a startup. And I say there are 5 elements to this, and it was funny when I say that, but it's 1 people, 2 people, 3 people, 4, is there market out there for what you're trying to do, and 5, does the product work? Mm-hmm. And what I didn't mention already is regarding people, looking back, I'd say, we had our ducks in a row. Because frankly honest, I mean, not me, but my 2 partners, they had a successful track record in the technology industry.
I mean, you industry. Did too.
Yeah, I mean, I was in finance, but they had really built the company from scratch. They had grown it with hundreds of employees. They had IPO'd it. So they really could say, they knew what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And also, we were still in this area of, I don't know whether you call it TMT these days, but telecom media technology. This was always kind of a bundle, back then. So these individuals literally came from this area. So the credibility and the track record was absolutely there. So regarding people, I'd say yes, at least the leading face is there. Regarding is there market out there? Now that's an interesting thing. Is there market out there? Well, we said absolutely, because we said the problem was there, and suffice to say, even today, we have this issue. When you use email, that hasn't changed very much. When you think about this. Clearly, we do have encrypted, ready with safe devices these days, whether it's WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal or others. Of course, time has caught up with this.
But even in the public sector, I can see governments being interested in something like this for communication.
Yeah. And even I was thinking, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is an issue for governance in 2 ways. One, yes, they should and are definitely interested in secure communication. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, when you think about crime, they'd very much like to actually crack the code or receive the code in order to be able to crack this, because that's the difficulty here. Mm-hmm. And when I think about Opolis, what was so new and innovative back then, I come back to this, why was this market, this may have been an issue. For instance, if you had lost your password, your login details, we as Opolis couldn't have helped you.
Wow.
Your data, your emails, it's gone. Because even Opolis did not know what your login details were, because
and had no mechanism
encryption,
to retrieve it or anything.
So therefore, if you lost your code or your password, that's it. Okay, I can't help you.
Was that designed on purpose?
It was designed on purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, it was absolutely designed on purpose. They said it's fully encrypted, point to point.
Yeah.
From the sender to the receiver, with a public kind of key and then a private key. So it was, don't want to go into technical details too much, but it was this asynchronous encryption, which was absolutely safe. Whereas on Opolis, I couldn't look into this, and I also couldn't look into emails. Okay. So the only thing we could look into is if a person A sent a message to a person B that we knew, but we couldn't access this. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't look into this, and I couldn't help you if you lost your data, which was quite interesting. So was there a market? The answer was yes. Mm-hmm. I think one of the issues back then was because people were often asking, well, can't we sort of use this as an add-on to our Outlook software, for instance, right?
They could have acquired
it. This is exactly what couldn't work, because then I can't help with encryption. We got to have a complete separate autark, if you want, the system. So therefore, you got to run this separately on your PC. So next to your Outlook, you would have Opolis. Okay, for maybe your special or very highly confidential emails that you maybe send to clients of yours or whoever. And that was the first issue. I think today, when I was looking back today, it's not an issue. We're used to having many communication devices. People use SMS and WhatsApp and Telegram and email today is up usual. Back then, this wasn't quite the case.
What was the main form of communication?
It was email, actually, or SMS, much more popular. WhatsApp, I would say, wasn't even invented back then.
Yeah.
So that was very new, and I'd say this was back then perceived as an inconvenience. Today, I would say for you it's normal, right? I don't like it personally. I also say I like to have, when I look, for example, for a message this day, I say, well, actually, where was it sent? Was it sent now?
Because there's so many,
these days, it's spread all over.
Yeah.
Back then, actually, life was easier. You say, well, basically, you go through emails, right? But Opolis, you had to run separately. Right. So the point was, that was a learning. That was an inconvenience, which was not so much liked. It was clearly also raising awareness. Also, what we figured out, and I remember I wrote even memos or mails or handbooks designed for lawyers, auditors, bankers, doctors, medical doctors, for instance, for medical reports, confidential ones, that certain business clusters would understand how this is relevant for their particular issues that they have in daily life, right? So when I'm looking back, already the fact that we had to explain this could mean, well, perhaps the awareness of the security breaches and manipulation possible, to get a message, an email from A to B, wasn't quite as aware. People wouldn't care so much. But there was also this inconvenience, I think, where the pickup rate, even the natural one without doing a lot of marketing, wasn't as great as it could have been.
When you first started, did you target specific sectors, or you talked about lawyers, doctors? Did you focus on one at the start and then expand?
They were the logical ones. As I said, for private messages, you wouldn't use Opolis would for. I mean, I'd say this is something where I'd say you primarily use it. So the idea was even to use it in parallel. So less confidential information, might not use your email, but for really confidential ones, you use Opolis for. But as I said, this was new, because suddenly on your laptop you would run two devices, right? So as I said, people were there. The market, item number 4, was probably there, but the question is, did we catch it the right way? And number 5 is, the product. And I'd say, the product was there. It worked. Also, we had our not only pilots, but actually was out there, and people used this app, and this worked actually flawlessly. So looking back, I would say, wait a second, didn't we have all the ducks in a row? And I should say, yes, actually we did. Quite interesting, we did. So why, and that's why we're sitting here, because you want to know why it failed, or why they continue with this.
What happened?
What happened, actually? To start with, Opolis was not innovative in that there was any new technology in this. Okay. What we did with this service, with this app sort of, was we combined existing technology. So what was new is combining these existing bits which were there. So you could argue that the barriers of entrance were not as high, and clearly technology and all this sort of moves on. That's sort of one item.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because look at WhatsApp. It hasn't really, it's not really revolutionary, and it hasn't changed much over time either.
That's true. Amazingly. And you can imagine we had this already in 2004 or 5.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, what WhatsApp is doing these days. What we didn't have, and that was a discussion internally, our device only worked on PCs.
Oh.
Why? And we were thinking about, because you got to develop a separate app then for mobile. And it was clear to us that's where we got to be, right? But for this, and for this effort, we were aware we would need outside help. We would need to hire, kind of programmers or some software engineers for this. Now, for this, you then need really money, because so far we had funded everything ourselves.
Was it expensive to get to this point?
The answer is no. I mean, time-wise, it was very intensive.
How
but
long?
it was not cash-intensive.
Okay.
No, yeah, I'd say we certainly had more or less intensive 2 years, working on this. And I say it was up and running. And when you looked at the website and everything, as I said, I had written the handbook, for instance, about it. That was pretty smooth. And but we did not have a mobile app.
Yeah.
And
what year was this now?
An issue.
What year was this now?
Now we're speaking now about. I'm just thinking. We're getting into 2004, 5, 6.
Okay.
So we're getting sort of into this kind of. We're getting just prior to the financial crisis, when we could see a lot of communications more and more moving to the smartphones.
Yeah.
Because I'm not even quite aware when actually Apple came out.
2007, I believe.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're speaking around that time, that the smartphones are becoming much more popular and people are using this much more and less at the PC, as particularly for communication. I mean, these days, look at it, when you have WhatsApp, primarily use it on your mobile phone and only secondary on your laptop, right? So that was an issue, but then clearly, as I said, to develop this app, we would have need help from outside, and for this, you need to raise funds. Now, in parallel, of course, we started with the effort of raising capital, but here the issue starts. When you raise funds for a startup, which clearly we were, despite the fact we were a little bit advanced, that we had already a pilot and it was working and so on and so forth, and again, credibility of the team was there. But we thought we got to start local. Because our view was, depending on how much you were looking, back then we were looking for about $1 million or something like this. So in today's world, really not much, and back then it wasn't that much. You'd say, okay, let's rather start local.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed very much. You can imagine the
risk appetite, or
risk appetite is clearly one area, is a question mark, but also, I mean, where to go and how many facilities are there, and that hasn't changed very much. Also, even today, despite the fact it has improved a little bit, but in essence, most of the venture capital platforms in this country are either private individuals or backed by private indivials. Would like to play a little bit.
The high net worth individuals.
We have some banks.
Okay.
So we have family offices. We have some banks, actually local banks. Sometimes have small facilities, but then also it's provinces who have platforms. And among others, we actually applied for capital of a venture capital platform of one of these provinces. And
when you say provinces, you mean is like a state or
province? So we have 9 provinces in Austria, and one of them, we approached, and it was a nightmare. So I'd say immediately it was an experience.
The bureaucracy?
Because yes, I mean, just as a starting point, you had to basically log a document, and I can't remember, was it 150 or 180 pages long? You must imagine, as it was a clear structure, and you fill in sort of line by line or field by field. And I thought already back then, it's crazy. I mean, it wasn't me doing this, but it was mostly my partners doing this. But in my view, we clearly lost time there already. And it was very clear they wouldn't, with them, you can't get very far. You know, they will support you with probably not even $1 million. They would have given us maybe a couple of 100,000 at best.
For equity or what was?
Equity. Yeah, clearly. There was equity. Don't ask me anymore, preferred or whether it was somehow a breed. But in essence, equity. Yes. And if you ask me already looking back on mistakes, and I believe looking back, the biggest mistake probably wasn't to aggressively go out and raise capital internationally, because we did have an application here that clearly tackled a global problem. You know, I mean, this everybody had email. Even today, everybody has email, and everybody has this issue. And in my view, what we should have done is we should have gone out to Silicon Valley and clearly, I can't tell you whether we have succeeded with this. Probably we may have failed. We don't know.
But why didn't you? What stopped you at the time?
Yeah, the good point is, why didn't we? And looking back, I always ask myself, why didn't I? Just get the material together and take a suitcase and fly over there. And I think it was a little bit that my partners, despite the fact that they were used to work with investment banks and were somehow after the IPO also used to work with international investors that were invested in their company, in their telecom company. They didn't feel comfortable about this. And even it's quite funny when 2-3 weeks ago I called Christian and I say, actually, Christian, what actually did go wrong? Why didn't we continue this? And I said exactly this. I said, my lesson is this. So aside the fact that we clearly needed to have an app on the mobile phone, no doubt about it, that was a mistake we should have done and pushed and implemented. But for this, we didn't have the resources, to be honest. We should have gone out there and gone to Silicon Valley. And the first reaction by Christian, as I said, 2 weeks ago or so when I had on the phone, he said, I never would have done this. I don't like this. This complete overselling and who's shouting out louder and all this, and I don't like this. And
so how did he get his first company to IPO?
Yeah, the first company to IPO, it's a good point. The full story I wouldn't even know, but you must also imagine he founded the first alternative telecom operator in this country, and that coincided with the whole telecom liberalization in Europe and probably globally as well, because you must imagine back then, like in the 70s and early 80s, telecom operators were government owned, and there was only one. There was barely a monopoly. That was it. And the liberalization drive led to the fact that suddenly you had competing telecom operators on a market. Okay, so clearly many investors were looking for such opportunities because there's so enormous growth potential in this.
So you didn't have to really sell it.
So therefore, I'd say it was less extent. That you got to go out there and push. It was more actually they were chasing you anyway, right?
So
you were there. You had a first track record, and I wouldn't say it was that easy. Money was rolling in, but this was a different kind of environment. With this, what we had, despite the fact you must say, really no one had something like this at the time. This was to be a selling proposition. And so you also, as I said myself, I'm looking also back and saying, why damn didn't we do it? but I guess it was a combination of this that slowly. So I think a combination of we didn't have the mobile app. Clearly, some competitors, if you want to, were catching up.
Which were the key? competitors?
Yeah, as I said, slowly these WhatsApps and others were slowly coming in, where, say, these kind of encrypted messages were becoming, or systems were becoming more and more popular. And then we didn't have anything which was, as I said before, unique, innovative, but it was more kind of a combination of existing technologies and bundled this kind of together. Despite the fact, when I looked through even, the kind of feature list we had like 15 years ago, even today, I'd say most of these features you don't have on WhatsApp, which we had on Opolis, and still have actually the. If you, I'm not even sure the website is working these days.
I did actually find it.
But when you download the app, right, it actually should still be working. So the servers, in my view, are still running. As far as I know. But I think it was a combination. As I said, we didn't have the app. We didn't aggressively go out there, and as you lose time. Kind of competitors are catching up, and then we're slowly running into 2008-9, which is the global financial crisis, which clearly for quite some time made any kind of proposition which was more risky or capital raising related heavily cumbersome, particularly when you came from a startup proposition. Even any IPO would have been difficult back then, and I'm not even sure. But going back to this, I think maybe they start again 2010, 2011, right? So it's a combination of this that over time. Sort of the company phased out. It still exists. It's still alive. I wouldn't say kicking, but it's still there. And in essence, maybe a last one, adding to this, also culturally in the team. Also, we worked very well together. It was really fantastic because we all had. Sort of our areas would be pretty clear who's responsible for what. But I think what was quite interesting, because my two partners came from a technical background. And clearly in technology, these things have to work. And in order, that, for example, a telecom company, it only works if things are perfect and running and 100%, not 99.8%, 100%, okay? Because downtime in telecom
costs
is a no-go.
And
philosophically, this culture also swapped over into Opolis. Also, for instance, I remember Christian, a partner of ours, spent days, I can't say weeks, but certainly days and nights and days on the logo. Okay? And getting the logo right, and getting the shapes right, and the colors right, and the shadow right. Okay? And, I was very pragmatic on this. I say, it's
minimum viable product. That's all you need.
Or we tried to secure various domains with various endings. Then we even we're spending months on incorporating a company in Bahrain. So our company was actually running out of Bahrain. And the reason was that at that point of time, encryption and the kind of field of tension with governments, as I mentioned before, was already visible. And even back then, I remember when at Opolis, in Poland, for instance, if I'm not mistaken, you had to actually provide the code to the government, which was that we're not going to do under any circumstances. Even today, these issues exist, right? I mean, governments quite often want the code.
They do.
And Telegram is the most recent example. And I say, no, we're not going to give it out. So we said, no, we're not going to domicile this in Europe somewhere, not even in the US. We want to look for a location where we think we're safe, and Bahrain seemed for us a location where it was safe. But what I want to tell you is we had all these kind of details, which clearly may have been important. A logo probably less or so. Where we spent a lot of time on, where it sort of was a sort of a perfectionism. And at the other hand, you can say, well, shouldn't we rather speed up and get this out to the market,
process,
right? And deal with some other issues later on, which I think certainly, is a point,
Okay.
But the key issue again is I think that we didn't address aggressively
The
capital
funding,
raising,
yeah.
and Christian, my partner, always said, look, I mean, clearly we can raise any amount of money eventually, but the problem is what do you want to spend it on? And it was clear to us, you would spend on marketing because the palette was there, scalability was very easy. So I'm no engineer, but they always told me this was very easy. That was not the big issue. The issue was just how do you push it out in the product. For this you need marketing, and then only looking back, whether it was cleverly invested or not, right? But at the end of the day, that's where quote unquote we failed, right?
So capital raising,
potentially
maybe just wrong timing. With everything that was going on.
We were too early.
Yeah.
So with the technology, it's quite interesting. You can be too early, and that's clearly also a lesson. So sometimes you may have a product which only becomes relevant much later because the people are not there yet. And we had to really start educating them on this issue. We said, listen, here is a problem. Are you aware of this? And it would have been idle if probably people had come to us and said, look, I have a problem. Can you fix it?
It would have been nice if there was like a big data breach or something, and then
we were too early. So we were definitely too early. But again, I come back to this. I think the fact that, and you asked the absolute right question before. I said, why didn't you do it and go out there? And today, I'd agree with you. I'd do it. I packed my suitcase.
I mean, what's stopping you now?
And go all over Silicon Valley. And even if it's on my own, I would go out there and pitch it, and probably also get valuable feedback from what, in the view of investors or prospective investors, may or may not work, or what the market may find digestible and what not, and I'll take it from there.
For sure. I think your point on the perfection is really interesting because people often think they need to have the product right and working really well. But taking a step back and thinking about testing the market with something draft and rough and then slowly improving on it probably makes more sense, especially with the logo. You often don't know what the market likes or things like that. So maybe reframing how you approach it as testing the market, instead of wanting to have a perfect product that is launched.
What I think we got right, in that regards to speed, what you're also addressing is, we also had a lengthy discussion on whether, despite the fact we had no original or genuine technology, nevertheless, the way we put these technologies together, whether we should actually apply for patents. In the US and Europe.
Did you apply for patents?
And the answer is we didn't.
Okay.
And because we looked through this, it's a very cumbersome process. So in our case, you would do this in Austria and Europe, but you would have to do it separately in the US. And the question clearly was, is it worth it? And our decision was, no, it isn't.
How come?
It's very costly. It's very time intensive. I'd say it's a process. Can't speak about it today, but back then it would have been 1 to 2 years to get a patent registered. And it's a very cumbersome, extensive process, again, with a lot of documentation, so on and so forth. So in that regards, I think that decision was right. As in a fast-moving technology, probably rather. The question clearly is, clearly someone can steal the technology from you, but vis-a-vis speed, what do you do? And it's tricky. It's not easy. I think, though, that was right. What we did there. But again, I'm coming back to this. It was about capital raising.
Capital raising.
That should have been done.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah. I think there would have been appetite. You never know, especially at that time. Software, it was really kicking
maybe
off.
I should warm it up one more time.
But why not? Well, do you have any sort of last things to add, or is that it so far?
No, I think at the end of the day, it was a very valuable and nice exercise.
Yeah.
And then you never know what happens. the interesting question is also from a VC point of view, why do you actually deal with startups at all? Why are these investors? Wouldn't be their life so much easier to invest in, equity of lengthily established companies with a lengthy track record than dealing with startups, which are much more time intensive and require more coaching and so on and so forth. And then, fun enough, from a corporate finance point of view, when you look at VCs on average vis-a-vis yield of that VCs produce vis-a-vis yields that well-diversified equity portfolios produce, it's not so much different. I mean, clearly, if you're lucky and you have a Microsoft or Apple or Google in your portfolio, Facebook, then it's wonderful. But many of them will fail at the end of the day. So I was wondering, why are people doing this at all? Why is there venture capital? And I think what the conclusion is, some of the investors, they like it. They have fun with this. They enjoy
love the
this.
Risk,
right? They enjoy this. Also working with young people, this kind of dialogue. So, also when I say, why have we done this? At the end of the day, we didn't become billionaires, obviously.
Not yet.
But it was an interesting experience. And it was, as I said, some of these lessons are there. And it was good we did it.
Did you enjoy the process, looking back at it?
Clearly it was time intensive. It was very, very time intensive. But the good news was we knew each other pretty well.
Okay. And you worked
well. So
therefore,
I have to say there were never, ever any kind of tension in working together.
That's
good. It was very, very nice, amicable. So in that regards, we were lucky. But also maybe that was wrong that we stuck too long together, the three of us. We didn't scale more, right? Despite, as I said, the other two had a track record in scaling a company massively, actually. But that was cool, and so that was never an issue, which clearly in a startup can be an issue when times get difficult, But we had no issue here.
Interesting.
So at the end of the day, and looking back, it was nevertheless a nice, good experience.
Very much so.
Part of my life,
And you never know, you can rehabilitate it again.
We'll see. I take your word.
Well, thank you so much for being with me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.